Chris, one of these days we are actually gonna have a regular fade to us, and so that they can see my goofy ass just drumming along to that sick beat that you made, rather than just that awful slide to black. StreamYard, get your shit together. What is going on, people? We're back. It's the Talkin TV podcast. Movie nerd and the TV nerd back to break down, things that are going on in the world of movies and TV in a way that's hopefully digestible for your guys' pleasure. And tonight's a big one. Tonight's a doozy. We only have 3 weeks left in the year. This is our official third to last podcast overall of 2020. We're almost.
What number podcast is it, by the way? I'm curious.
The Talkin TV podcast. I mean, come on, they're here.
What number are we on?
Number 65. I've actually been keeping track now because I've actually been paying attention to the numbers. Yeah, episode 65. So by the time season 2 will be done with, we'll be on episode 67. Chris, it's interesting because most TV shows, when they get to the end of season 2, that's usually their make or break point. After season 1, people usually are like, okay, that was a good first season, but I need to see if the show's got some legs. It can either be a one and done or it can have some longevity. I've seen the case with both of those situations multiple times. And the thing about season 2s is it's usually when a show, I would say, comes into its own. I would make the argument that Lost really came into its own in season 2 after season 1 kind of played like the boundary between is this a Survivor show or is this a supernatural show? Game of Thrones, again, as tremendous as that show was, it was still surprisingly very centralized in these smaller storylines before they just blew up and expanded with its cast of characters in subsequent seasons. Every show that I've seen, every good show I've seen that I should say, pretty much does that. So I guess my question is this the stagnation point for us? Or are we just going to keep going up and up and getting crazier and crazier with each season?
Oh, dude. I mean, for a fact, the idea is the well has nowhere near even begun to start running dry, let alone.
For all those with actual intelligence, it should have been a trick question, but I need something spicy in order to get this started.
Listen, we haven't even shown what this is going to be yet, I think. So if you like where we're at right now, just wait for 2 to 3 more years, because we are just coming into our own, and it's crazy how much we've already done, in my opinion.
So we're going to be that rare show that finally hits it in season 5. And by the time we get to season 5, that's when everyone's going to be like, okay, now we're talking. Because
let me one up that. We're that rare show that people think already hit it, but then when season 5 or 6 rolls around, they're like, can you believe they just keep getting better and better?
So we are Game of Thrones, that's exactly what Game of Thrones did, which is ironic
without the last 2 seasons.
Well, it's ironic because it's funny that you mentioned the last 2 seasons. The season 5 is arguably when people started to complain about the show, really complain, not just this didn't happen in the books, actually that Sansa Ramsay scene that was not in the books, and yikes, that was pretty much when the show kind of torpedoed itself. But we're not a Game of Thrones show, at least not yet. So, Chris, it's actually funny that because, once again, like we always do on the show, we always manage to make these opening segments tie in perfectly with what we're going to talk about in the episode, to a T. It's almost insane. And how the idea of kind of the future of our format in general and kind of what that spells for the future of us and also just the future of media in general ties in very nicely with what I like to call the last of our kind of batch of overall topics that we've talked about. We talked about a lot of generalized topics in addition to specific movies that we like this year. We did an episode talking about comedy and what the future of that genre does. We did a whole episode ripping Netflix a new one, as we will continue to do as the years come. Couple others that obviously we talked about generally our relationship with Star Wars, but that was kind of a no-brainer. We finally did our Marvel episode. And now today is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while. But just because of the schedule and because of our lives and because I literally kept calling Chris every 5 minutes to be like, Chris, we got to do this and add this to the schedule somehow. But we're finally doing it tonight. And Chris, maybe you could. So I actually want to hear a little bit from you before we get started, which is when I pitched this idea to you originally, and you were just kind of trying to wrap your brain around it, be like, okay, what is it that this is actually good? Kind of bring the viewers in. What is your idea of kind of what the future of cinema holds? It seems like a loaded question, but I want you to give it a lot of thought and actually prime our audience for what's to come.
Sure. Yeah. So when Dom initially pitched this, I don't know, I want to say it first crossed my desk, as people like to say, maybe 2.5 months ago tops. Right. And I feel like this topic is very dependent on where the world is at in regards to the whole lockdown and stuff. So I was kind of at that point in time thinking to myself, well, I mean, no one knows what's going on right now. The election is a week away, if not 2 to 3 weeks just passed, and it's still crazy, and no one knows if we're going to go into this dark winter or if we're just going to say F it and everyone's just going to spread this thing because we finally had enough with it. I feel like this is very dependent, unfortunately, on where the political leaders and decision makers of the world rely with their thought processes, because it's a global pandemic. We're all going through it. And I hate crossing that line on this show, but that's kind of why I was like, I just don't feel that I have enough information to bring my best to this topic, because I'm all for the arts, man. Like, what happened in the early 2000s when you had Alex from Levels of the Geek on, and you guys did that emergency podcast 2 weeks ago to talk about HBO and that Warner Brothers thing where you can go to theaters or you can get all their movies for the slate of 2021 at your couch for the safety and the peace of mind, really, is what it was to me for the consumer. He parlayed that really nicely back to the Napster days and how much of a hit that actually took on the music industry in hindsight. People at the time didn't realize it was a slow descent, but it's something they've never been able to recover from. And that's also another situation that was marred around legislation, right? Lars Ulrich from Metallica went to the Supreme Court and battled it out. He lost, but it was years of, well, if Lars can't win, then the old guard may fall. And look what happened, you know? And so, and he wasn't the only one. He's just the big celebrity figure that was a part of the case. But so that's kind of why I was like, I just don't know if I can speak about this and give it the respect it deserves, because we're still waiting on everyone. But now, you know, we have gotten a few announcements like that HBO announcement, and more recently, like the Disney announcement, which I don't think anything's definitive yet, but the picture's certainly been painted in a lot more. So I think we can actually offer our interesting take to it. Because we're like, you know, everyone we collaborate with here on YouTube is brilliant in their own way, but I feel like we've been very much so more scholarly rooted because we bring Professor Pat on and we have these deep analytical discussions. So now I feel like we can really get into it. So Dom, take it away, man.
Hopefully I'm going to sound a little bit more coherent than I did last week. I still have no idea what it was just last week in general that made me sound like a drunken fool, which it's funny. I went back and listened to that podcast. I'm like, okay, I wasn't as incoherent as I thought I was, but
yeah,
the whole, and kind of what I'm trying to accomplish today is to kind of paint a picture, I think, of just how much has happened in this year. Crazy enough as it is to believe, I know we went through a lot this year, but what I mean by that is people's memories are short, obviously. And I feel like the whole idea of obviously painting a picture is very similar to what The Wire did. All the pieces matter. So my goal with today's podcast is I want to kind of paint a picture of everything that's happened this year in the media landscape with both the specific movies and the studio decisions. I want to bounce a little numbers. That's right, people. When we say analytical, we're going to get financial, because guess what? Movies are all finance. They're finance and they're marketing. That's what they are. And we're going to kind of spell some truths for you guys, if you will. And we're also just going to talk about kind of, you know, our preferences and what we want to see, obviously, because this is still at the end of the day a subjective podcast, as objective as we can be. You know, there's only a certain amount of objective that we can be. There's a reason why we're doing this and, you know, not working on Wall Street. But so to kick this off, Chris, I'm going to start. I put together a little handmade timeline of all the events that I remembered roughly off the top of my head, combined with a little bit of obviously just fact and date checking of everything that happened since kind of the beginning of the pandemic. So I want you guys to think back long, long ago, all of 2,000 years ago, to the beginning of this pandemic in 2020. It's March. Well, technically end of February, beginning of March. The rumors are beginning to arise. Ooh, what's this new disease that's happening? And overall, just our government kind of saying, it's fine. That's nothing to worry about. It's not at all lethal. China didn't just lose a bunch of people to this thing. We're fine. It can't possibly get over to us. Oh, fun times. But anyways, so the first obvious thing that kind of really, I feel like, made us, you know, in a little movie bubble aware of things is the James Bond movie, Bond 25, which had officially been titled No Time to Die, was pushed back from its original April release date to November. That was the first time where we were like, oh, this shit just got real. I believe the cover story was at first that they were doing it in order to save their overseas box office gross. But at the end of the day, that was when that was around the beginning of March. Onward had just come out in theaters, and people were beginning to realize, okay, this thing might actually be serious. So followed by that, it was just like a rapid succession of events. You started to see movie after movie after movie after movie, pretty much the entire slate for the spring and summer, slightly going into the fall, all get pushed back. I'm talking Quiet Place 2, Black Widow, Saw, Candyman, Wonder Woman when it was originally pushed back because it was originally supposed to come out over the summer. In the Heights, Soul was pushed back. That's right, people. It was pushed back before they put it on Disney+. Last Night in Soho, Many Saints of Newark, French Dispatch, pretty much any and all movies that were set to come out were all pushed back. And shortly thereafter, the pandemic, all areas that contained, what was it, more than like that would contain more than 200 people, forbidden, banned, shut down, which unfortunately included movie theaters. That was around March and April. Then you got a couple months in around like the May, June, July area. Summer sets in. I believe the overall amount of numbers of the pandemic went down a bit. People were like, okay, we can get a little bit chill. We can go out. We can party a bit, social distancing, obviously, which again, if you want like an example of just how much of a farce that is, then go ahead and just check out some of the local park congregation spots near our area. Oh my God. I was like, wow, COVID really does apparently take a break for when people congregate in large park area spaces. So that just made me chuckle. But so after that, right? So it was two big decisions really that happened around the summer, that June, July period of time. Number one, obviously, the big decision from Judd Apatow and Universal to release King of Staten Island directly to VOD rather than wait and delay that amongst many other movies, as well as Christopher Nolan and Warner Brothers' staunch decision to, despite the fact that Tenet had been delayed 2 months from July to September, to keep Tenet in its original theatrical opening position. They were not going to move for anything, regardless of when theaters were open. So, I mean, I still don't even want to think about the scenario where theaters just don't open at all, as opposed to that weird, like, kind of micro reopening that they did in September, which again, still would love to know the thought process behind that. So, but around then, right, that was when we also started to see other bits of news. So the other big thing to kind of keep in mind then is that's when Disney releases Mulan, which was one of the movies that was pushed back originally on the Disney Plus app for that kind of extra premium $30.99 plus edition. But again, I think that it's pretty apparent that the mistake there was the decision to announce at the same time that they were announcing the premiere access that the movie would be available for free 2 months later. That was not a smart decision, especially after they'd already kind of called quits on Onward and kind of eaten the money overall that they lost when they chose to release Onward directly on Disney Plus only 2 week and a half after it had been in theater. So we really didn't even have a chance to make money.
Can I just add there, out of all the times to be transparent, Disney chooses then? I mean, why start now? It's like this company that just has so many skeletons in their closet chooses to be honest when they lose money because of it. Like what?
Not to mention that of all the movies to choose, that's the one that they went with all the stuff that happened behind that. Which again, the fact that movie was not more talked about as far as kind of the controversial filmmaking is still baffling to me. But more on that.
Right. Real quick, because for some reason later, StreamYard doesn't want to show the chat tonight.
Reports of numbers are becoming really, really intel on VOD.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Man, lag is a real yet again, fellas. StreamYard, step your game up, like we said. But the chat isn't showing on the StreamYard, but we do have a few people in the chat talking to us as we speak. So I just want to shout out Luke and Stranger Boyd and AMFU for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Dom, take it away again.
All right. So by then, that's when the reports start to come out. It's like, oh, okay, this is doing well. This is doing well, but they don't actually release any numbers. So we're like, okay, how do we actually know that this is doing well? Because again, for all of you guys who are interested in kind of traditional film, box office film has a certain production budget. In order to match it, it has to do at least twice its production budget in order to at least turn a profit. At least 4 times is when it's usually considered a global success. But with the numbers that they don't tell you, the numbers that they usually show you are usually just the production budget, which usually includes the actor salaries, obviously the salaries of the cast, the cost of equipment, the cost of shooting, all that good stuff. But in addition to that, you also have usually the numbers, the marketing numbers, which usually, for whatever reason, are not included in the overall production budget. So that's why usually whenever you see kind of these billion-dollar movies, you understand, okay, they have to hit that $4 billion number in order to at least turn a profit. So obviously the idea being that a lot of these movies that were being released direct to VOD were smaller movies that didn't need to make those kinds of numbers. But still, the idea already being that that's when kind of the confusion and the just therefore overall lack of information begins as far as the overall reporting of these numbers. Netflix also, with their continued just overall incessant reign, released a series of movies during the pandemic that so-called claimed to be profitable. Obviously, the big two talking ones being Extraction from the Russo brothers production company Agbo, starring Chris Hemsworth, and Spike Lee's new film Da 5 Bloods, which opened the same weekend as The King of Staten Island. And Netflix did the unthinkable during this whole thing and actually release their overall viewing numbers for their top 10 rank. Remember that, Chris?
What a year. I mean, Disney shows a moral compass for the first time. Netflix releases numbers for the first time. 2020.
We never heard of them again.
2020.
We never heard from them again because obviously since then, Netflix, who has been notoriously known for not showing their numbers, obviously continued with that game. So the next big thing, which ultimately I would say was not quite the final nail in the coffin of the theater going experience, but kind of close to it. Like I'd say like about second or third to last, just about, which is obviously the disastrous release of Tenet and just how Warner Brothers handled that release, just that overall strategy. I still don't really know what the decision was. I think it was just it was just a mix of everything. Nolan really pushing hard for that movie to get released in theaters. The studio desperately wanted to really just risk it all and test where people were at. But to gamble it away on that movie, I think is still ridiculous because again, that's an original movie that's the equivalent, that has the budget that's equivalent to like that of the Marvel movies. You need that movie to make money in order to be profitable. So to say the least, Tenet was a gigantic box office flop. The theaters were doing this weird little rollout. Theaters, for the most part, had opened everywhere except for New York and California, which were still staunchly closed. Drive-ins were still opening, though, but Warner Brothers made the genius decision to not send the screeners to drive-ins or to any critics for fear that there would be spoilers. Again, absolutely just brilliant decision-making here from Warner Brothers, which is, again, the movie studio that released Batman vs. Superman and had Suicide Squad edited by a trailer company. Again,
Dom, can I add something kind of interesting to your Tenet conversation? Because it's funny you brought this up. When I was looking up something for it, Tenet actually has made its money back, though, since.
Really?
It's made its money back since. It just initially flopped. So I don't know how you categorize this because check this out. As of December 13th, 2020, Tenet has grossed
$9 million. What's its budget?
Well, let me type that in.
Yeah. Just click on Wikipedia. Just click on Wikipedia right there. Oh, 205 million. Dude, it's got to do at least that's still not a profit. 205 million, unless that 305 was built. Yeah, that's not necessarily a success. That's almost double, but that's not quite. That movie has to hit at least. It should have made
$1 billion. I mean, I think they wanted $1 billion.
I don't know about $1 billion, but definitely would have done. I mean, I don't remember what Dunkirk's numbers were, but it definitely should have. They were expecting that in the ballpark of like 700 to 800 million worldwide overall.
No, I just had read that earlier today, and I was like, how do you rate this movie? How do you gauge the success rate?
It's not if it does not do double its production numbers plus the advertising numbers plus Nolan's just, I'm sure, ridiculous salary and back end pay. That movie did not do money. And what's even worse about that movie is not only the actual numbers of what it did, but also the disaster in handling how they were reported, because there were lots of false reports that were reported. Obviously, again, I'm repeating words. I love doing that, of the overall numbers and kind of what the actual numbers were versus what they were projecting. And overall, it was not spelling out news for Warner Brothers. Again, the big internet joke that erupted from that is the idea of Tenet, that was the movie that was supposed to restore movie theaters, ended up probably killing them. So after that, Tenet kind of seals the deal overall. That's around the same time Disney said that they're putting their emphasis on streaming entirely for the foreseeable future. All of the remaining 2020 movies, blockbusters that were set to still release later in the year, are either pushed back or released or pushed to a streaming service, i.e. Soul. Disney shortly thereafter makes the decision to put Soul for free on Disney Plus for Christmas Day. But then after that, there were two announcements that were momentous to say the least. One that would obviously have further implications for a certain studio, but one that I still want to talk about, which I still don't think enough people have talked about, which is obviously the circulation back to kind of the movie that kicked this all off, which is the discussion around No Time to Die, James Bond, because I think that this movie has the most interesting out of all of the movies that have kind of been affected by this. So Bond, obviously, famously originally supposed to open in March, delayed to November originally, and then once we got to November, the movie's famously now been delayed again to April of next year. But what was interesting about this whole situation is there was an article that was released around the time of, I want to say it was late October, early November, because I think that's when I texted you about this, when supposedly it was a rumor at first, but the article made it seem like it was very real that MGM was shopping Bond out to other streaming services. But obviously, because Bond is Bond, both not only because of the production numbers for that movie, but also for just the legacy that title has overall, and just how the production family that owns that intellectual property still feels about it. They were shopping it around for they were taking no less than 600, 700 million. And for a while there, it seemed like Apple TV was the front runner to get that movie, which I find interesting because I think about that. I've noticed about just Apple's content, if we're just talking about the streaming services and the different kind of differences that they bring to the table when it comes to the content that they offer, is that Apple, we both watched Ted Lasso. You love that show. I was bored to tears by that show. And that's the thing, is that all of their stuff looks the same, not subject matter wise, but aesthetics wise. They all have that very glossy, very boring look to it. And so I find it interesting because that to me screamed back, obviously with the original article, just that first article that was released around late October and early November, it seemed to state that that was kind of what was going to be Apple's power play kind of into the new streaming wars. Obviously, we didn't really know what the terms were going to be yet because at the time, Disney and Warner Brothers had not made their announcements for their streaming yet. But it was certainly interesting to say the least, especially considering that I think like a day later, MGM and the Broccoli family comes out and specifically states, yeah, this was false. We are not doing that. We are still pursuing this for a theatrical release overall, and we will not be doing the streaming deal. But what I find interesting overall, besides just the actual deal and the fact that it was ever in consideration for the first place, is that MGM is obviously not in the position that it was that we saw, in Mank in like the 30s and 40s when they were one of like the top two film studios. They're like, I'm pretty sure Bond is their only intellectual property that they have. And that's kind of like what's been sustaining them. Apparently the studio also took on some financial difficulties in order to get the last Bond movie made, just because of the exorbitant salaries that I'm sure just in getting Craig back for this supposed last time alone. And the fact that even supposedly they were considering, again, we don't actually know if they were considering it or if it was just like an article that they were trying to circulate in order to get like the rumors going. But either way, the fact that they would consider Bond itself for streaming is kind of insane, and just kind of overall the scenarios, because I think it's safe to say
that's huge, because that's an entire mentality shift. I mean, that's just taking the industry and just flipping it sideways. That's saying, hey, listen, we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel anytime soon, so we got to get this movie out because we want to make more films, and we're going to take the shot. And that's like taking your shot before anyone else does with a film that big. And I think we're going to see that soon with Wonder Woman. That's kind of like the next film of that caliber, that stature, that blockbuster, get your butt in seats. You might go to the movie 3 times a year. It might be for that 1 or 2 superhero films you choose to see, and a James Bond or a Fast and the Furious. Like, they're taking the shot with Wonder Woman in a few days, whatever it is, that this month we're going to see, like, well, what's the impact going to be? Are they going to make their money back? Was this a flop by monetary standards? Did they not gross as much because it's off a subscription now, but did more people see it? And if more people saw it, then they got to go take a look at the books and reevaluate it. And I know that's what we're going to get into here, but just initially off what you just said, like for James Bond to even consider that shows a shift. And it shows that, hey, we might, unfortunately, because I think it's so sad, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of jobs. The movie industry is like a huge industry, one of the last few beacons in this country where a lot of people make their living off of, a job source in the nation. I hope it comes back, but for them to think that it says so much. It says so much, man.
I find it interesting that you bring up kind of the mode of distribution and kind of viewing overall, right? Because the idea being that obviously in the last couple of years, a couple of, directors who shall remain nameless, even though you should know who we're talking about, have made it abundantly clear kind of their thoughts on the kind of where the means of film viewing were going, kind of obviously, the lack of attention span, the gravitation towards technology and much shorter form content as opposed to traditional theater going experiences. And obviously the overemphasis on blockbusters and spectacle film viewing over kind of more traditional modern means. And again, obviously the ideology of old school filmmakers versus the modern day movie economy is always going to be a source of never ending amusement for certain people. But what I find interesting overall about kind of that point that you brought up is that, believe it or not, for me personally, I feel like a majority of movies have become palatable that is like, okay, I feel like even with something this ridiculously huge of a blockbuster, I could still imagine seeing it on the small screen just because of like what these streaming services have allowed us to become accustomed to. Again, we got Game of Thrones, a show that was arguably Braveheart each week for 8 years. since 2011. Not just, obviously, again, they were much smaller in scale and production budget earlier in the day than in some of those later seasons, but still, like the fact that we got the Battle of the Bastards, which 20 years ago you never would have seen that anywhere other than on the big screen, is ridiculous. Now, obviously, that plays into the whole changing times and technological advances and all that argument, but I wanted to dive into a couple of some ancillary notes that I got here, which is the idea of, so we talked a lot about kind of the timeline of events, obviously, and we talked a lot about kind of, we've talked, I think, all year about, like, again, what is the difference? And just really since we started podcasting, just in general, I'm talking like way back when, just like, what is the difference between movies and TV? Is there really a difference anymore? Just when it comes to the, the breakdown of the storytelling structure. But what I really wanted to dive into is, how do streaming services make money? We joked a lot about kind of the fact of, oh, if something is released on streaming, how do we tell whether it's successful? There is no, because, and I'm trying to figure that out. I'm like, what is the metric for success? So I was doing some reading overall. I had some sites pulled up. I dove into, oh my God, these websites' names are amazing. I dove into Investopedia. I dove into the Hollywood Reporter. I dove into Spartan Shield. I dove into the numbers. I did my due diligence. I did my homework. And, I feel like I feel like my college essay writing professors would be proud of me, citing my sources and all that, because if not, I'd lose fucking half a grade because I forgot to cite a source properly, because I'm going to do that in real life. But anyways, I'm not going to take shots at the American education system right now. That's too easy. But anyways, how do streaming say though,
I think it's smart to make the streaming service the emphasis here, because I mean, theaters are crying. There were so many podcasts that came out around August, and I don't mean crying in the sense that they're whining, like they're hurting. And, you remember August when they were talking about like needing bailouts and all that. I mean, it's not good out there. So the streaming services are in the craziest position of power right now to sort of figure out how to drive the most butts to their platform, not in seats. You're sitting on your couch, so...
Well, not me. I'm sitting in this fucking awesome chair that I got, and oh my God, like I literally posted this yesterday on the Instagram when I said it. I'm like,
oh man, most comfy.
Work productivity and comfort overall are about to shoot through the roof. Anyway, so it's funny that you mentioned the idea of success. I wanted to read you off a typical amount of numbers. So first off, how do streaming services make money? So this is just some hard base facts overall, just as how they make money. This is not a subjective statement overall. So it's just the thing, right? Netflix, obviously, the lead, the pioneer, the revolutionary in the streaming model, right? They have posted negative cash flow every year since 2011 due to the overall company strategy of spending heavily in order to finance growth, right? So when they put down money on a project, their emphasis is not on, okay, what is our return on investment? Their emphasis on is, okay, how are we going to incorporate this into our library in order to boost our number of subscribers, right? Kind of a little bit of an antithesis of the traditional business model. Obviously, their primary source being their production on original entertainment. But 2020, this year itself, is a momentous year because for the first 3 quarters of the year, this is the first year in the 6-7 years that Netflix has been as just a force now, that they've posted positive cash flow, right? The longest running joke of the last couple of years was, how is it that Netflix is putting out all this content and making money? They're like, I'm like, by all traditional financial means, they should be bankrupt, because obviously another big thing is advertisement, television. They make money because Nielsen ratings give a solid basis for how many ads the they get paid to run. Exactly.
It's like the whole bidding cycle where, hey, my show gets 14 million viewers a night, so you can sell an advertisement spot higher than a show that gets 7 million. And so that's kind of a little bit how it works and whatnot. And it is pretty crazy, man, because, do you think, and I'm curious to see where your research takes you, but I kind of want to pose this question before we get too far into it. Was a breaking point coming for streaming services? And in most of people's darkest times, did they get bailed out by all of this craziness?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, again, it's so funny because we talk about how things always seem to be going in this direction where the only things that were going to be playing in theaters after a certain point were the giant budget spectacle things, and everything else mid-budget or lower was going to Netflix, where kind of it already was. Again, I've been listening to a couple of just discussions from filmmakers, and this is from years ago, keep in mind, like 2015, 2016, about where the future of entertainment was. And they said, the reason why you don't see as many good movies is because a majority of the filmmakers who not even 10 years ago would be making those movies have gone to television. That's been a staple for years. That's not new news overall. But
Totally.
obviously,
Can you
again,
screen share the articles, by the way?
I will.
As you get into them? I'd be curious to see.
I might be able to, only because I'm trying to go through this really quickly so I can get to my other stuff. And also it's on different tabs. So unlike other media companies, obviously, which profit through selling ad space via Nielsen ratings, again, brings me to my next point. Netflix doesn't have ads. We've been saying this for like multiple amounts of times. We've made multiple podcasts. We've joked about it multiple times. Netflix doesn't run ads. They don't have advertisement costs. They don't make money. That's not a source of revenue for them overall. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because I don't think people really understand kind of just how much advertisement overall is still such a huge part of the overall economy of movie making and just media and art in general. Because to put this in perspective and to compare this to the music equivalent of Netflix, right? The top, I would say the most listened to as far as when it comes to music streaming, Spotify, right? Spotify still runs a tremendous amount of ads on their platform in addition to the subscriptions for ad-free music and space. So they're making money both on their subscription costs and their overall ads that they run. Again, what's the joke about YouTube and Google? They make money off their ads, which is true. Google's number one source of revenue is from advertisements overall. I'm not kidding on that. And this brings me to my next point, which is, are they profitable? So again, I reported that Netflix, obviously, again, for the first 3 quarters of 2020, for the first time in their streaming run, posted positive cash flow. But despite the streaming boom, obviously because of the pandemic, right? Financial experts on Wall Street are actually still saying that new streaming platforms won't have the biggest financial beneficiaries, at least yet, because unlike traditional studios, the streaming money is still flowing primarily to the content creators, which is something that is still primarily new. Obviously, studios have gone out of their way in order to rework traditional contracts when it comes to what they offer these creators. But again, it's the idea of, again, creators just have so much more freedom that they never would have had otherwise in the traditional system, and they get paid directly for it. They don't have to worry about heavy negotiations or everything. Netflix say, okay, we like your idea. Sure, we read the first page. Great. If not, it'll be canceled after 2 seasons. But hey, you had your shot, and we'll just have it as part of our library. But hey, your shot, kid. Overall, The good news about this, though,
think about this, though. Here's another layer. Here's something I researched just to type it in. So Scarlett Johansson, and I saw this in the Hollywood Reporter. I guess it's a pretty credible source in this realm of things. They were basically saying that she, before Brie Larson, was the highest paid woman in Marvel, but it wasn't initially. See, she made bonuses after the numbers came in and the movie hit a certain X amount of views and a certain X amount of dollars. With Netflix, you get your flat rate, you get paid up front. It's more reliable for creators, which I think benefits creativity.
At first, but I'm actually going to get into that because that actually has an important part to do with just kind of how this is going to, if streaming is the future, obviously, which it seems for the most part to be, how that's going to affect contracts going forward, because you're going to see a lot of that back end stipulation for which again is what a lot of actors went for. That's going to change very, very heavily. Okay. And I'm glad that you brought up the Scarlet point, because I want to bring up because do me a favor, while I'm talking next, research the Robert Downey Jr. deal that he made with Marvel when he was negotiating his contract before Iron Man 3. Those numbers are going to fucking blast your face off. But so the idea obviously is that the whole Netflix argument still, I think, is that it's really not applicable to the other studios that are ending the streaming game. Not the smaller things like the Quibbies or the Crackles or, well, Shudder's a weird case kind of, but I'm talking the big dogs, right? Your Amazons, your Hulus. Now, obviously, the newest entrance is Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, HBO Max, right? These are streaming services that are owned by studios that, for the most part, the majority of their revenue is not their streaming service. Obviously, that is changing going forward. But again, Apple, they're really worried about making money immediately from Apple TV Plus because they're still making bank from their phones. Amazon obviously has treated Prime Video like a joke for years now, you know? Warner Brothers had kind of HBO Now going for a while and finally got into the HBO Max game, obviously with kind of their extension on cartoons and Criterion Collection and old movies. And Disney, despite the focus now on streaming overall, still, again, their merchandising, their toy sales, their theme parks, which, again, I still have no idea whether those actually are open or not. But the point being is that it's not a situation where they are going to lose a tremendous amount by gearing up to go in this direction in the future, because Disney has actually already said that it anticipates its streamers, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu, they're already expecting to be at their absolute, there to be a drag on their bottom line until 2024. Like, the financial experts have sat down, they've already looked this over. They've already expected, they're like, okay, we knew we were going to lose money any which way but lose, right? Any which way we looked as far as what the pandemic was going to bring. So at the very least, best case, they can kind of strap their bootstraps on and get prepped for this. And AT&T, which obviously famously owns Warner Media, which is obviously the HBO Max parent company, what's it called? They expected the exact same. And now, while all the new streaming options were expected to boost the time consumers spend watching video, obviously pay TV operators would see obviously the subscriber loss due to cord cutting, which meant the overall total subscription video market wouldn't grow much. But it did forecast spending on subscription VOD services from new media giants such as Netflix and Amazon to reach a compound annual growth rate of 12.7% between 2019 and 2024, and products from traditional media companies such as Walt Disney and AT&T's Warner Media to jump 33.9% overall. So even though they're not expecting a gigantic jump, they're expecting overall the kind of the underlying financial kind of gains over time will equate the immediate losses overall, to kind of summarize that last little bit of rhetoric there. Now, as far as jumping into the back-end pay and stipulation,
by the way,
and just kind of what that's going to...
Yeah. Everyone in the chat saying like facts, like Perp Minded's in here chilling, and he's like, yeah, facts to all this stuff. So everyone's kind of... You know, it's, hey man, and Perp actually, it's funny, he alluded to the music industry, which we kind of started off to set the tone with as well. So he can see the writing on the walls as well, it seems. Yeah, okay. So yeah, man, I looked at this Robert Downey Jr. thing, by the way. Yeah, so tell me what's crazy. Well, his renegotiation seems to really be where he's thriving. Like, he made $5 million a day for the 3-week period he worked on Spider-Man Homecoming. Which is insane, dude.
Which wasn't even a primarily owned Marvel movie. So get this, right? After the Avengers, before his Iron Man 3, he negotiated to not only have a tremendous salary overall, but to make a percentage of the profit of the box office gross. And think about how much money each, specifically him, right? Just specifically him. Think about how much money each of the movies that he was in post the Avengers made. We're talking Iron Man 3, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame, which are 6 of the highest grossing MCU movies total.
And some of the highest grossing movies of all time. And think about that. That's insane. And you know what this tells me, man? This to me says that even if the streaming services now are starting to finally break even and sort of cut back on some of that massive debt that they have because of the state of the theaters, if we want this star power with how much money these stars are getting and demanding and I guess have earned because these films are so big, they're either going to put themselves right back in this hole, they're going to bust and go under, and then we'll have no content, or we're going to have to learn to sort of let go of those stars. And who knows? This boiling point is coming. That's my point. This isn't going to sustain itself, no matter how good it might look for the streaming services right now.
The answer lies behind door number 3, because you hit the nail on the head as far as what's coming next. So
let's hear it.
I had under here next. Total box office gross. So this is the total box office gross that I got from the numbers.com of the total box office 2019 versus 2020. You ready for this? This is going to shock you. So total box office gross of 2019, $11,252,100,868, we estimated. Take a guess as to what the overall numbers are for 2020 compared to that number.
Can you repeat the number from 2019? I'm sorry, it cut out a bit.
19. 11,252,100. Sorry, I'll start over. 11,252,100,868.
And this is what the streaming services brought in as far as revenue goes.
2019. No. Theaters. Theatrical box office gross.
Okay. Gotcha. And you want me to guess what it was this year? Did we even crack 2 billion?
We cracked $1 billion. We cracked 1 billion. I'll say that.
Did we crack 2 though? Is what I said.
No.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I figured. That's a huge hit. Yeah. I don't know how you recover.
1,967,456,755. That's
not sustainable.
Oh my God. Like, I don't even want to think about what percentage drop up. Oh my God. So this brings me into kind of the last point before I figure we would just positive, even in the face of certain kind of inevitable doom at this point when it comes to the future of theater going. So if theaters do come back, they will definitely not be in a position to definitely not be in a position to kind of make the demands because again, this I actually didn't know, but I was
All right, guys. I was waiting. I was trying to get Dom back in here. I don't think, unfortunately, he's connected properly right now. So I'm going to have to remove him and have him reconnect. But guys, this is insane. It does not look like the movie industry is going to recover the way that we hope. And I hope it does because, I mean, man, going to the film, watching art, consuming art, being a creator, it gives me life, you know? And it's just like, the numbers don't lie, though, and that's kind of the point of why we wanted to do this. I know the connection has been a bit crazy. We live in the Northeast, and it's getting very wintry out here at this point in time. But the point and the sentiment still stands. I mean, it is just. I mean, think about it. It's like Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. They can't expect to get hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of like 3-4 years for all these films. If now we're going to a set pay staple each week. Sorry, I'm Italian. I try and talk with my hands too much. Like they can't expect to get $55 million if you're paying $12 a month at Disney Plus. You could have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but you're never going to be able to break even because that's just paying one person out of all the different facets that a production costs to run. You have your crew, your lighting staff, your director, the writing team, like everything, the costume design to the set design. It's a massive undertaking, and it's just Dom's right, man. I hope he can reconnect and get back in here, and if he can't, we will 100% do a part 2 to this thing and finish it up the way that it deserves to. But man, it is just catastrophic because somebody will buy out AMC. I hope, man. And yes, Dom is the frozen man. I guess that's very Christmassy, I suppose. That's interesting if someone buys out AMC. I'm not quite sure what that would actually, do to sustain, because that means that person is going to lose out either way. But here's what I kind of think. I think Dom's right in everything that the research that he pulled up. And like me being a music guy, I've been on record labels before. I've toured. My bands have been small businesses. I know people who are on Sony and Warner Brothers Records. Like I understand that the industries are hurting, and I have friends who quite literally their livelihood is still the music industry, and they're still struggling to make money in the music industry because when streaming came in, it didn't matter, dude. Like Spotify signed deals with Warner Brothers, Spotify signed deals with RCA, Spotify signed deals with, Island, Def Jam, all these different labels, but the deals didn't help the artists. The deals were, hey, Warner Brothers, we're going to cut a deal with you where we'll put your artists in our premier playlist to grow them, but the artist is still getting that fixed point, whatever it is, of a percentage of the stream. They're not getting this lucrative portion of the deal that the suits cut. So if someone comes in and buys AMC, why would we think that they wouldn't follow suit with the music industry? Because the music industry was the first major entertainment titan to fall and completely still picking the pieces up 20, 15 years later after Lars Ulrich, like we said at the top of this thing, went to the Supreme Court and tried to tell everyone, like, we need to make Napster illegal. This is not okay. We worked to make these songs. We signed a contract where we're giving up a portion of our rights for these songs, and we shouldn't have to, give them away for free, because it's not sustainable. So that's kind of where I think we're at. I mean, even if Jeff Bezos, Perp, I don't even think Jeff Bezos would be able to take the monetary hit that is gonna become of anyone who buys out like any of these big theaters. But Dom, now that you're back, now that your connection seems to be nice and clean,
my internet died again. So
that's fine, man. I was just talking to the chat, and they were all kind of on the same page. I think what we need to do right now, though, is restart with this third phase of the process.
Yes.
Dom, restart right there. We'll go a little longer because I think we need to.
Yeah, I think we need to, definitely. So as far as the third phase of the problem, obviously it's no surprise that people know that. Again, people don't care about going to the theaters anymore. They want to stay home. They want to, again, even with the idea of why the idea for the extra, oh my God, what is it called? Now I'm losing all my words again because this fucking internet reset. Obviously because of all of the, oh my God, with the Premier Access, the idea of why the Premier Access, that's the fucking word I was looking for. Why the Premier Access,
we're back.
Why the Premier Access wasn't a bad idea inherently was because they knew that people have families and people are going to spend $30 to watch this thing if it means that they could shut their kids up for 5 minutes. Like it's not that difficult. It is common sense. And with one of their more recent releases that they announced, obviously in the Disney Investor Day announcement, is that Raya and the Last Dragon, which is their next animated film, will be going directly to Disney Plus on March 5th, but only available for the Premier Access. They did not give a specific release date as to when it would be available for free, which I think is the smart idea. I personally think that's what they should have done with Mulan in the first place, but I understand why they didn't go for that. Those are two stipulations. But the third one, and I think this is the biggest one, obviously, which is that, and this is kind of the sad/crazy conclusion that I was coming to beforehand, which is that it's a sad state of affairs, but guess what? Until such time as the U.S. government forces studios and the streaming services to release their numbers, we have no means of figuring out whether these streaming services are actually successful, because we have no means of telling what the numbers are. So we have no means of determining success overall for movies, which means we have no idea what they're going to spend on the movies going forward, and we have no idea kind of what movies we're going to get, because obviously the idea of spectacle movie going and why that's going to go away now, I think as a result of kind of this refocus on streaming, is the simple fact that as good as streaming is, streaming can't put out like the budgeted level stuff of like the Marvel stuff. They just can't do that overall. Like, obviously you're seeing what Disney Plus is capable of, and their shows certainly look cool, and they're certainly doing things technologically wise that no other show is doing. But I mean, like, again, like we're never going to get like something like an Avengers Endgame level again, not to that level, So yeah, obviously this creates so many different stipulations, not only with kind of where they're going to renegotiate with the theaters, but also with the stars, because this is going to completely change. Just again, agents are already having to shift up like how to primarily pitch to actors, the contracts involved, because again, like you mentioned before with the Netflix, there's no back end pay. Like one of the craziest things is that about like Netflix and all those TV shows that they did is that the contracts that they signed, obviously, when they first got those TV shows, is that obviously TV shows, when they enter syndication, that means that the star gets paid for every time that, or for anybody who filled out the contract, the star gets paid every time the episode is played. Those rules don't apply to Netflix. So whenever anybody or any of your college friends went to watch The Office for the 15th billionth time, the stars weren't making money from the Netflix hits, only when it was on actual TV. And now that's going to go away, especially as more of these streaming services happen. So all of that back end, that TV stars, that movie stars, which again is what a majority, much more movie stars go for, because despite the fact that initial higher paid salary might seem lucrative at first, trust me, money goes quick. And there's a big difference between a one-time payment versus a subscription service, which is basically what these actors get with these royalties and these back-end deals. Is they're basically getting paid every time somebody watches. Like Keanu Reeves is not a multi-billionaire because he made 3 Matrix movies. Keanu Reeves is a multi-billionaire because he made 3 Matrix movies and gets paid every single time they are watched or a DVD is bought. That's a lot of money right there. Just
it's like watching how with Spotify, the royalty cut for the musician, you still have it, but does it mean anything? You went from getting, a couple dollars every time your song was there to 0.000785 cents every time your song is streamed. Like, it is so different. And so to me, it kind of seems that either one of two things has to happen. Audiences need to accept paying exorbitantly more for their streaming services to get these big, crazy spectacles like Endgame, which I do agree with you when you say that we might not ever come close, but at least like try and get there. Maybe a $30 subscription, maybe a $35 subscription would justify that. Maybe, or these stars are either going to die in the old system or they're going to have to get a lower pay cut because something's going to give, everything you're saying, something's going to give. And I don't really see how it doesn't, man. Perp saying he's completely fine with the lower budget films or just look at the Joker, for example. You don't need $100 million to create a successful film. Maybe this is where good writing starts the show again. And the better script wins maybe. But either way, we're not going to be going on like we have been. Dom, what's your next point on all this?
Here's what I'll say first, again, to the guy who talked about the Joker movie. Again, the thing I will say about that movie, right thought process when it comes to making it, extremely wrong means of executing it, because good God, I am sick to death of white incel movies. And the last thing we needed from last year was a white incel movie directed by Todd Phillips, of all people, to win Joaquin Phoenix's Oscar. That's just sad on so many different levels.
Sure, yeah. I don't think he was talking about the content of the film.
I understand what he was going for.
No, I know.
Yes, no, you're right, though. He does bring up a good point, which is that, again, if this does lead to, not only with TV, with movies, the return of the mid-budget movies, which, again, are personally some of my favorite movies and where we get some of the best movies overall, and we get a return to actual creative thought and effort that is put into our content, then sure, I'm all for that, obviously. But, again, it's a thing that we talked about. That's not what people are watching, though. People are watching their usual. They're watching their Marvel. They're watching their Star Wars. They want to be entertained. And as of right now, even in this weird space that we're in, big budget spectacle, lots of blasting, lots of effects, shoot 'em ups is still the way to get people's attention. Again, there are so many different interesting dramas that I've been watching over the last couple of weeks. And guess what? What's the biggest thing that has still been able to keep my attention? The Mandalorian, which is why Disney obviously could put out 20 Star Wars things, and we can complain about them all we want, and we'll still obviously watch them. But meanwhile, it's one of my favorite movies of the year, Bad Education, gets talked about a little bit and then gets some Emmy nominations, which feels like a slap in the face because that should be getting Oscar nominations. But that's obviously just me crying and bitching and being, my own little biased theater-going guy. But obviously, again, I've always kind of been fighting this kind of never-ending battle with myself, which is where obviously I like the theater-going experience, but I hate the people who fill up the theaters. In every single movie that I watched this year prior to COVID, with the exception of a few, I had a negative theater-going experience. There were people talking, which is funny because I didn't really have that in the fall of 2019. It's so funny because, ironically enough, prior to all this craziness, fall of 2019 was one of the best just movie-going seasons in general, because that's when you got stuff like Parasite, The Lighthouse, Uncut Gems, and they all went to theaters.
Right.
The Irishman and Marriage Story were obviously straight to Netflix, but those 3 movies, I just like Jojo Rabbit, all those movies went to theaters. And for the most part, all those movies did moderately successfully well, and all those movies were nominated for Oscars, and all those movies were talked about. Which, again, I love that because I'm like, yeah, this feels like kind of a throwback to the falls when I was early on in high school that I kind of missed because I wasn't really into movies that way back then. Obviously fall of 2010, 2011, 2012, and even before that, like fall of 2007, 8, 9, which is like when things started to get like really, really interesting. And that was when like you started to see a little bit of a shift in the Oscars, because obviously famously, No Country for Old Men, which is like one of the bleakest movies ever made, wins Best Picture in 2007. And then The Dark Knight not getting nominated for a Best Picture completely changes the game and forces the Oscars to go up to 10. We're talking obviously strictly with a certain genre of movie overall, but obviously this still has a precedent, and obviously the idea that they're still trying to make the Oscars happen this year, which is still just laughable to me in general, just because of everything we know about the ceremony in addition and what it means in addition to the technicals and just, the hypotheticals of trying to run award ceremonies in a post-COVID world. But it's just funny to me overall,
Dude, let me say, man, you raised a good point too about sort of, the theater experience popped into my head. We're talking about the effects on film, right? And so for me, I think a movie is simultaneously very much so a personal experience, while at the same time, it's also a group experience. I mean, some of my favorite moments of recent years, just of life, hanging out and whatnot, unwinding, is going out with my friends after a long week of school, class, work, whatever, and watching a film and maybe not enjoying the film as much while I'm watching it, but then that discussion afterwards as we go to a diner, as we most often did, or Buffalo Wild Wings, right, which is right across the street from our theater. It's that conversation, that exchanging of ideas and what did you get out of this film, and talking about it in the moment, which enriched the experience and maybe turned a good movie sour or a bad movie, or a good movie bad after I got other people's opinions. So it's like losing that too, I think, is going to be a big thing. Like, we have fun, we hang out and we watch movies together when we can. We try and be safe with this COVID stuff, but it's different. Like, there's nothing like going to that theater, making a night of it, getting excited on the ride there to see the film. That all plays into it, man. And we're going to lose the experience as well of theaters, which I think enhance the movie industry.
It's funny because the numbers will tell you one thing, obviously, as we have made more than apparent tonight, but the people itself will tell you another, which is that it's funny. I go back to a line from the pilot of Succession. Again, very great show, and season 3 is coming back hopefully in either spring or late summer of 2021. So cannot wait to be doing that recap on this channel, which is that what's it called? Logan says to his son Kendall when he's admonishing him in the pilot, which is that he says, everyone thought that the theaters were done, but then what do you know? Everyone wanted to go out, which I find to be such an ironic and weirdly enough kind of foretelling statement, especially considering that this is from the pilot of a fictional TV show about a fictionalized take on the Murdoch family. But what I find so interesting about that is that you're right, because even though obviously the economics and the numbers will tell you one thing as far as what people prefer when it comes to going out versus staying at home, you talk to a majority of people specifically in certain demographics, because it's not just people our age. Obviously, you go to theater, you know what the number one demographic I see at the theater is? Old people. People like 50 and up. They love going to the theater. My grandma loves going to the theater. And I think one of the biggest mistakes in the pre-COVID days that the studios did not do was capitalizing on movies that appeal to those demographics. Because let me tell you something, you get something like a book club, or you get something like The Intern, movies that could mean less than nothing to people like us, but to those demographics, oh my God. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you get something like Mother's Day, which is laughable. Again, the last film from the late, great Gary Marshall, but you get something like that. And then and then it's like, and you're like, wait, how do these movies? It's the same as with the Twilight movies. You're like, how do these movies make money? Because it's the same age-old thing that nobody has been talking about, which is that, guess what? When you appeal to a demographic, you will make money. It's what saved Titanic, quite literally, was James Cameron understanding that that was the demographic that he had to hit in order for that movie, which was famously shaping up to be the biggest box office production nightmare disaster in film history since Apocalypse Now, and he saved it with his knowledge of demographics. That's all it comes down to at the end of the day. And
yeah, and real quick, because before we get too far away from the point, because you're kind of Perp in the chat is talking about, he's countering sort of our sentiment right now in regards to bringing up social media, and he's saying like, well, I mean, you can still interact with, instead of tens of people in theaters, right? Tens of people, you can interact with millions of people in regards to a movie online. And I think that all comes down to your perspective, and sort of our generation, I think, is the most divided in regards to, I know a bunch of people who could be content with staying in and having conversations online on a Friday night, or there's some of people our age who want to go out and who hate that. And this is all a part of we're talking about the way the industries are changing. I think we need to talk about the mental shift that's happening. Right. I think that raises a good point. I personally disagree. I want to have that. Look, this is the next best thing. I want to be doing podcasts with you in a room together soon. This is the next best thing for me, but this isn't my number one ideal thing, I want that human connection.
It's interesting that you bring that up about our generation specifically, because our generation has always been kind of that generation that's stuck in the middle, because again, we came into our own in a very, very changing time when this technology was still in its infancy. So we obviously still have a very, very clear grasp of understanding of kind of social patterns and the way they were before. But because this technology has been around for so much of our adolescence, our formative years, even though we still have that base instinct, we're still easily able to adapt. But that's kind of why our generation specifically is always kind of be stuck in the middle position, and why we're always going to find it harder to adapt to kind of the exclusively online space than certain other younger generations do. But I mean, for me personally, I mean, there's nights that I'd rather go out and there's nights where I'd rather stay in. But I definitely know that, for my money, again, like just my taste with each movie changes. There are movies that I want to go out and I want to watch with the crowd and I want to have a great time with it. I want to kind of just enjoy like a sports game, like the last couple of Marvel movies and superhero movies. And there are movies that I just want to sit by myself and watch, and just kind of get introspective, because there's movies, I'm not going to lie, there have been movies that have been ruined for me because I watched them with other people. And then when I watch them later on my own, in a dark room, with enough time to actually think, I'm like, wow, that movie's incredible. And I never would have had this type of experience if I had watched this in a crowded room with other people just yelling and talking and screaming and munching on snacks, But that's just me personally, I know, again, it's going to appeal differently to everyone, but you're right. That demographic is kind of...
you know what? I don't think that thought even comes around without streaming services and without the idea of a Netflix original movie or a Hulu original movie. If streaming services never come around, that thought is... I think it's fewer and far between. I mean, sure, you can watch a film after it airs when it finally hits the TV, maybe a year later or something. But if we're talking about going and seeing a brand new movie, I mean, up until recently, there was only one way to do that. It was drive to a theater and get your butt in a seat. But I agree. I agree. There are some movies that are better viewed alone by yourself. And it's just this new way we consume.
Well, that's the effects it's having. Overall what brings me to kind of the answer of this whole kind of discussion that we've had. And obviously, as my face has been forced to shrink and come up much closer because I had to switch to my laptop, thank God.
But a true pro always has a backup.
I do. Like a true pro, I always have a backup. And again, because this is not the first time that this has happened to me. Unfortunately, I'm really, really getting sick of this. But overall, it kind of just brings me to my answer right now, which is that unfortunately, and I hate to say this, and I hate to be this guy, because I'm sure a lot of people were coming to this podcast in order to try and find answers. But right now, there are none. The future is still too uncertain right now. That's the beautiful thing about the future, is that the future is never set permanently. But again, we don't know what the future holds for streaming services. We don't know what the future holds for theaters. For all we know, things could go right back to normal with theaters once the vaccine becomes a thing. I don't think it will, and I think that any rational thinking person understands that will not be the case, and that it's wishful thinking at best, but it's a possibility overall. Again, I think that kind of the only takeaway that I can have is we are going to see much less transparency when it comes to the, oh my God, I always forget this word, the dissemination, I'll say that, screw it, I don't care. The dissemination of information from the studios to us overall when it comes to kind of the success behind movies. I think that's going to become more and more ambiguous with time. And that overall, I don't know if that's going to be better or worse for movies going forward. My gut says worse, because again, checks and balances are kind of needed. And the studio systems, when they are not held to certain accountability, obviously we see, not good things for them, as is the case with anything else with unchecked power. But again, that's more kind of factoring into that rational common sense argument. But yeah, unless you have anything else to add to that, that's kind of just like what I was trying to get at, which is that we still have no idea what's going to happen overall. But it's definitely was fun to kind of look at everything that happened, and just how people like to talk about the fact that, so much has changed, but the idea that we can break down, but how has it changed? That's the fun part.
Yeah, man. And Perp's talking about, He's saying we're about to go back on lockdown again. And I was going to say, before he even said that, how much runway did these companies have left? I mean, how much runway can they sustain? They've been
shorter and shorter by the day.
They've been begging for bailouts. They've been begging for some help. They've been begging to get butts and seats, and they haven't gotten that. How much more runway do they have? And sure, yeah, we've gotten some creative films out of this. We got that horror film Host, which I actually thought was pretty good. And that was bred out of being locked down. And it's on Shudder. It's a Shudder original. It's about the seance over Zoom, which is cool. Like, artists will find a way to create even in the most trying of times, but we can't answer this right now. I think we've kind of said I think this is the conversation is best suited revisiting in 6 months, 4 months, 5 months, whenever we get more information, because you're right. Even if we do go back next week, is it too late? Has the final nail already been put in the coffin?
We don't know.
Will theaters become that in each cities? Will they become like a museum type thing? Like, oh, you went to a theater? What'd you see?
Yeah. Could be like they could all become like the Alamo Draft House, which would be like the best case scenario. I would love that. I loved the one time I went to the Alamo Draft House, even though I puked at it. I had a great time with the movie that I watched. So
you did? Damn,
yeah, that was a different thing, not related to the actual movie itself. That was just, I don't know what was happening that I either drank too much or I just was not feeling good. But this was pre-COVID. That was back when you could actually get sick and get a stomach bug without having to worry if you were going to die or not or infect other people. But
yeah, who knows, man? This was a great topic, dude. I think
definitely. I'm glad that we were able to get through it, even with technical issues abounding. So
we're pros. We'll get through it.
Yeah, that's what we do. We'll get there. But hopefully we won't have this problem. We're actually, doing this in person at the studio. That'll be nice. You have no idea how nice it'll be when my parents when my parents go to yell at me for being too loud at night, and I can tell them, oh, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be, at our actual studio recording. That's going to be nice. So that's
behind me, guys. That's the full set. I've been blocking it out because I want to give it the proper unveiling when Dom's here.
Yes.
And hey, man. Sooner than later. That's all I'm going to say.
Sooner rather than later. Remember, Chris, 12 seasons in a short film. When we'll make the short film, we have no idea.
12 seasons in a short film.
12 seasons and a short film. So, people, with that being said, thank you for tuning in to yet another Talkin TV podcast episode. Again, it was a little bit of a stressful episode. It was a little bit of a problematic episode, but it was an important one to say the least. I feel like we went through all our points that we wanted to say graciously. And with that being said, we only have 2 podcast episodes. So I'm talking main central podcast episodes that air on Monday nights at 8 p.m. left for the year. Next week, we will be doing our second official debate moderated by Joe of Guy at the Movies. It's official, people. Mano a mano, battle of the sitcoms. The conflict that's been building all year. It was originally going to be like a multi-stacked team plate, but at the end of the day, it had to be between me and Chris. Just like Force Awakens, we're doing it Office versus Community. It's coming to you guys next Monday. Probably going to end up trying to do it on this computer just for the sake of avoiding any lag or technical issues, but it's going to be a momentous smackdown. As you all know, The Office is like the most watched and beloved sitcom of the 20th century. I still have no idea why people find that show funny. And I'm gonna fight hard for Community because it's the actual greatest sitcom ever made. And there's an argument to be made that besides Seinfeld, it's the only other good sitcom that's ever made. But again, more on that the following Monday. And then after that, the last Monday of the year, the 28th, we will be doing that'll be our post-Christmas special episode as well as our season 2 finale, wherein we will be discussing Words, the 2 movies that dropped on the streaming services on Christmas Day, that being Soul and Wonder Woman 84. We'll be covering them both in the same episode. Wait. So if you want to catch our thoughts on both those movies, you better tune into that episode because you're not getting it again. But
Tom, where can they find all that stuff?
Well, I'm about to get to that. So, but I wasn't done promoting our content because we have a lot more stuff to promote. So Wednesdays, we also have new topics going up. We will have, as a little bit of fun bonus material for that debate, we will be having Office and Community season tier ranking, similar to the tier ranking that Chris and AJ did earlier this year with Lost. We will be doing The Office 2 nights from now, Wednesday the 16th. The debate and then post the debate the following Wednesday, the 23rd, we will be doing the Community season tier ranking. So that will be a lot of fun. And then Friday, this coming weekend, people, it's going to be a big one. It's going to be probably the biggest weekend that we've had yet. And I'm hoping to God that the internet is strong enough to maintain just the awesomeness that it is about to see from this weekend from us. Because Friday night, we have the finale of The Mandalorian Season 2, which unfortunately brings an end to our time on Mando Watch, but we're going to go out with a bang. Hopefully, it provides for a better discussion than our Lovecraft finale, because as entertaining as that panel was, good God, could I not have forgotten sooner about that show. The Mandalorian, I don't think will be the case with that. However, we're going to have a fully stacked, what is it, like 8-9 person panel talking about that show overall.
It's going to be big. It's going to be big, guys.
It's going to be big overall. So tune into the final episode of Mando Watch. This coming Friday the 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then the following day, Friday the 19th. This is where you're really going to want to pay attention. This is where you're really going to turn on your focus, your attention goggles here. You know, those goggles that Mole had from the movie Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Friday the 19th, the 1-year anniversary of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. Us, the Talkin TV boys, will be doing a live script reading of Colin Trevorrow's published but not made Star Wars Episode 9, Duel of the Fates. We're going to be pulling in a lot of our fellow creators that we've teamed up with and met this year on YouTube. And we are going to be doing a full script reading for you guys. If you guys are unfamiliar with how that works, I strongly encourage you guys to go and look up the Community and Scott Pilgrim versus the World script readings that they did for charity over the summer. It was a lot of fun. Great. We hope that we can be just as fun as that. And it's going to be very exciting. That's going to be this Saturday, the 19th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on
we've been unveiling the casting on our Instagram. Go check it out. Some of your favorite YouTubers are going to be really getting out of their comfort zones, and we couldn't be more thankful to have this all-star cast, man. A momentous
occasion, not just for us, but for everyone involved. Some old faces, some new faces. It's going to be insane overall. And guys, you can find all that and more by subscribing to the channel here, the Talkin TV YouTube channel. Again, below this video, you'll see that little subscribe button that you can punch. That way you get, and then you can click the little bell next to it. That way you get notified every time we put up new content overall. Also, if you click the like and leave a comment on these videos, that will give us, the creators, more info as to provide you, the watchers, the consumers, if you will, what content it is that you like overall. Chris, it's been fun, man. Like, I still can't believe that we're at the end of season 2 and we're already about to enter season 3, because guess what? We're only going to take a couple days off after that Soul Wonder Woman episode, and then we're coming right back to you guys the following week. We're going to be doing a special for New Year's Day to kick off 2021 the right way, and then it's going to be business as usual next year. We've got a lot of top 10s that we're going to use for the podcast in order to kick off this year. We've got some movies that are turning 20. We've got some TV shows. We've got some movies. And also the long-awaited return of Cobra Kai season 3. And that's just in the first month, people.
I know.
That's just in the first month. It's going to be insane, to say the least, overall. Chris, where can the good people find us on the social medias?
Yeah, the people can find us at Talkin TV Podcast right there. Just Instagram it, Facebook it. That's it. And also you can find me on my personal at Christian Ivanko. I'm going to be putting some music out in the new year. I know I speak about being a musician a lot, and I'm going to get back to showing you guys that I am one. So you can find the link in the description of that video as well. It's at Christian Ivanko, as well as I plan to make a lot of music for our channel too. So I just wanted to let them know about that. And Dom, what about you? You got a personal, right?
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, movie nerd reviews on Facebook and Instagram. I don't really post much because literally everything I do now is for the channel. But again, I showed it off before because, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult on this webcam because it's my crappy Apple webcam as opposed to my super awesome computer webcam. But I mean, check that out, people. Look at that.
Still looks awesome.
The new movie nerd throne. Oh my God, this thing is so beyond comfortable. This thing has so many different recliner options that I didn't even know were possible overall. Like I said, my overall productivity rate is going to go through the roof. So people, thank you once again. We've been so happy to be able to transmit all of this crazy information to you guys throughout the year of 2020. We hope to be giving you guys this sort of information for many more years to come. Like I said, hashtag 12 seasons in a short film. And with that, people, thank you once again. Have a good night. Stay safe. And as always, watch more fucking movies and TV.